Deep inside a mountain, buried beneath concrete and secrecy, a machine was being built. Not a tank, not a bomb, something far more dangerous. Something the world had never seen before. By 1944, Germany was losing. Cities were burning. Armies were retreating. But inside a hidden facility, a small group of scientists believed they were weeks away from changing everything. The Allied commanders knew something was coming. They just didn't know what, and if it had been ready, even 6 months earlier. The war may never have ended the way history remembers it. Welcome to WWII Ghost Wings, the channel where the forgotten stories of the Second World War finally get the attention they deserve. If this is the first time joining us here, a very warm welcome indeed. And if there's a moment to spare, a quiet click on that subscribe button would mean the world. New stories arrive regularly. Real history, told with care and respect, just the way it ought to be told. Now, where in the world is this being watched from today? Drop it in the comments below. It's always a wonderful thing to see how far these stories travel. And if real history matters, if these forgotten chapters of the war deserve to be heard, go ahead and give this video a like. And turn on that notification bell, so not a single story is ever missed. Now let the story begin. The maps on the wall no longer told a story of victory. By the autumn of 1943, the great sweeping red arrows that had once marked Nazi Germany's conquest across Europe had slowed, stalled, and in many places, begun to reverse. Stalingrad was gone. 500,000 Axis soldiers lost in the frozen Russian steppe. In North Africa, Rommel's legendary Afrika Korps had been pushed into the sea. In the skies above Germany, Allied bombers arrived in waves so massive they darkened the sun over cities that had once celebrated Hitler's rise with torchlight and thunder. The Reich that was built to last 1,000 years was beginning to crack. Inside the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's fortified command complex buried deep in the forests of East Prussia, the mood had changed. Gone was the intoxicating certainty of the early war years. In its place sat something far more volatile: desperation. And desperate men reach for desperate weapons. It was inside this atmosphere of controlled panic that a program unlike anything the world had ever seen was given its full, unconditional support. The Germans called it the Wunderwaffe, the Wonder Weapon, a collection of classified projects so advanced, so far beyond conventional warfare, that those who worked on them were forbidden from speaking, even to their own families. The minds behind these programs were not soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, visionaries, men like Werner von Braun, a young aerospace engineer whose obsession with rockets bordered on religious devotion, men like Kurt Tank, an aircraft designer who looked at the sky and saw not limits, but possibilities. And behind all of them, the cold, calculating hand of Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments, who understood something Hitler often forgot, that wars are not won by speeches alone. They are won by steel, by fuel, and by technology no enemy can match. The facilities were hidden deliberately, tucked inside mountains, buried beneath forests, constructed by forced labor under conditions history would later judge with devastating clarity. The world above ground was burning, but underground, something extraordinary was being assembled. If this story is already pulling at something, that feeling that history is stranger and darker than the textbooks admit, go ahead and give this video a like, and share it with someone who loves real history. There is much more still to come. A pencil sketch on a drafting table. That was how it began. Not with military order, not with a general's command, but with a single drawing. Lines on paper. The quiet beginning of something that would consume thousands of lives, hundreds of millions of Reichsmarks, and the final remaining genius of a crumbling empire. Inside Germany's most secretive research installations, the atmosphere was unlike anything found on a conventional battlefield. There were no trenches here, no mud, no artillery, thunder rattling the walls at dawn. Instead, there were chalkboards covered in equations, wind tunnels screaming at impossible speeds, and engineers working 20-hour days fueled by nothing but ambition and fear. Fear, because everyone inside those facilities understood the same unspoken truth. If they failed, Germany failed with them. The Wunderwaffe program was not a single weapon. It was a constellation of ideas, each one more audacious than the last. The V-2 ballistic missile, the world's first long-range guided rocket, was already in development at the vast research complex at Peenemünde on Germany's northern coast. Von Braun's team had been pushing its limits for years, suffering catastrophic failures in silence, watched over by SS officers whose patience was measured not in months, but in results. Then there was a Horten Ho 229, a flying-wing aircraft so aerodynamically radical that decades later, engineers would discover it carried a primitive form of radar-absorbing material embedded in its frame, a stealth aircraft. In 1944, built not by a superpower with unlimited resources, but by two brothers, Raymar and Walter Horten, working against time and against doubt. Beneath the Atlantic, German naval engineers were developing Type XXI U-boats, submarines so advanced they could travel faster underwater than on the surface, stay submerged for days without surfacing, and strike with silence that made existing Allied detection systems nearly useless. And in the deepest shadows of all, barely spoken of even within the Reich itself, fragments of a nuclear program flickered, underfunded, mismanaged, quietly sabotaged by scientists who understood, with terrible clarity, what a Nazi atomic bomb would mean for humanity. But here is where the story fractures. Because Hitler did not trust his own scientists. He believed in spectacle over strategy. He demanded weapons that could terrorize, not necessarily weapons that could win. When his advisors urged concentration of resources onto one or two programs with genuine war-changing potential, Hitler scattered the budget across dozens of projects simultaneously, ensuring that none of them received what they truly needed to reach completion in time. The rivalries inside the program were savage. Department heads hoarded materials. Engineers sabotaged competing teams to protect their own funding. The SS demanded results on impossible timelines. And beneath all of it, the Allied bombing campaigns were getting closer, more precise, more relentless. The spark had been lit, but the hands holding it were already beginning to tremble. There is a date that does not appear in most history books. The night of August 17, 1943. While the world slept, nearly 600 British bombers crossed the dark water of the North Sea in near-perfect silence. No city was their target that night. No railway junction. No industrial complex. Their target was a name most people had never heard, Peenemünde. And when the first bombs fell on Germany's most secretive research facility, the men inside those burning laboratories understood something with cold, devastating certainty. The Allies knew the raid on Peenemünde was not an accident. It was a result of one of the most remarkable intelligence operations of the entire war. A network of spies, aerial reconnaissance photographs, and the quiet courage of a Polish underground operative had pieced together the impossible, the location and purpose of Germany's most guarded secret. What had taken years to build was reduced to rubble in a single night. Dozens of scientists were killed. Critical prototypes were destroyed. The V-2 program was forced to relocate, deep underground, into the carved mountain tunnels of Mittelwerk, where thousands of concentration camp prisoners would labor and die assembling rockets beneath the earth. The delay cost Germany months it did not have. But the story does not end there, because even wounded, even scattered and bleeding, the program did not stop. The Horten Ho 229 was moved to a facility in Friedrichsroda. By early 1945, the first powered prototype had taken to the skies. Test pilots reported handling characteristics unlike anything they had ever experienced. It was fast, dangerously fast, and its unusual shape confused early radar returns in ways that Allied engineers could not yet fully explain. General Heinz Guderian and senior Luftwaffe commanders understood what they were watching. If this aircraft could be produced at scale, if the factories could be protected long enough, it carried the theoretical range to reach the eastern seaboard of the United States. The Americans understood it too. General George Patton's Third Army received quiet, urgent orders. Among the military objectives of his famous drive across Germany in early 1945, tucked between bridges, fuel depots, and command posts, was a single, unusual priority: find the flying wing. Before it flies, Patton's forces reached the Horten facility at Friedrichsroda in April 1945. Inside, They discovered a nearly completed Ho 229 days, perhaps hours, away from its final assembly. The war in Europe ended weeks later. The margin was not months. It was not weeks. It was days. History turned on moments this thin, this terrifying, this close. What do you think? Had Germany been given just a few more months, could this weapon have genuinely changed the outcome of the war? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Every perspective matters here. The guns fell silent in May 1945, but the race was just beginning. Even before the last German soldier laid down his rifle, before the ink had dried on the instruments of surrender, two superpowers were already moving through the rubble of the Third Reich with singular, urgent purpose. Not to mourn, not to rebuild, to collect. The Americans called Operation Paperclip, a program so quietly ruthless in its ambition that its own architects took decades to fully acknowledge it. Under its orders, over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technical specialists were extracted from defeated Germany and relocated to the United States. Their records were scrubbed. Their wartime affiliations were buried beneath carefully worded security clearances. Their pasts were made conveniently invisible. Werner von Braun, the man who had built the V-2 rocket using the broken bodies of concentration camp prisoners, arrived in America not as a war criminal, but as a pioneer. He would go on to design the Saturn V rocket that carried American astronauts to the moon. The very same mind that had rained terror on London from the skies now pointed his calculations toward the stars and was celebrated for it. The Soviets moved with equal hunger. Their own extraction operation, known as Operation Osoaviakim, swept through the Soviet-occupied zones of Germany in a single night, October 22, 1946. Thousands of German specialists and their families were loaded onto trains before dawn. By morning, they were gone, absorbed into the Soviet military-industrial complex, their knowledge transferred quietly into foundations of Russian rocket technology, aviation design, and eventually the Soviet nuclear program. The Horton Ho 229 that Patton's forces captured was shipped to the United States. It was studied, measured, analyzed in extraordinary detail. Decades later, researchers at Northrop Grumman, the same company that would eventually build the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, confirmed what the Horton brothers had stumbled upon in wartime Germany. The flying wing design, the radar-absorbing properties, the aerodynamic philosophy, the B-2, the very symbol of American air supremacy, carried the ghost of a Nazi blueprint inside its bones. This is the truth that comfortable history prefers to leave unspoken, that the line between the darkest chapter of the 20th century and the technological world built after it is not a clean break. It is a continuation, a transfer, a quiet inheritance that shaped the space race, the Cold War, and the military technologies that still patrol the skies today. The Wunderwaffe did not win the war for Nazi Germany, but it did not disappear either. It simply changed uniforms. And in the decades that followed, launched from American launch pads, tested in Soviet facilities, refined inside classified programs on both sides of the Iron Curtain, the secret weapons of the Third Reich continued their work, not for the Reich, for the world that replaced it. History does not always end where the textbooks say it does. Sometimes the most consequential chapter begins exactly where the story is supposed to be over. If this story moves something in you, if it changed the way history looks even slightly, please consider sharing this video with a fellow history lover. These stories deserve to be heard. And if this channel has earned a place on the subscription list, that subscribe button is right there. Every new story release will be waiting. For the next journey, search for our video on the ghost pilots of World War II right here on WWII Ghost Wings. The skies still hold secrets. Until next time, history remembers everything.